Perfect.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Duff, and I'm with the New England Environmental Finance Center. I'm joined today by Grace Little and Elliot Boardman from FB Environmental. And today we're going to talk about the work that has been happening and is currently happening in the Upper Saco River corridor, specifically how recreation planning can be used as a tool to support watershed health and water quality. And so this is really a story about collaboration between communities, the state of New Hampshire, and technical partners, and how planning can be structured in a way that leads to actionable outcomes. So after we quickly introduce our organizations, we'll go over how the project started and then wrap up by talking about outcomes and what this work sets up next. Before we jump into the projects themselves, I just want to take a quick minute to talk about who we are at the New England Environmental Finance Center, or the NEFC, and then Grace and Elliot will do the same for FB Environmental. So at the NEFC, we're one of EPA's university-based environmental finance centers, and we're housed at the University of Southern Maine in Portland. Even though we're based in Maine, we work across all six New England states, mostly with communities that are trying to move water and resilience projects forward, but are running into capacity constraints, complex challenges, resource constraints. And so our niche is really the planning and financing side of water and climate resilience. A lot of the communities we work with know they have a problem, either stormwater, wastewater, or drinking water related, but they're not always sure what the path forward looks like or how to connect early planning to actual funding that is available. And so one thing that's important to clarify is that at the NEFC, we're not a funding agency ourselves. We don't award grants or loans, but we do offer no-cost technical assistance. So helping communities understand funding programs, shape realistic project scopes, and prepare strong funding applications, and hopefully moving projects from those early ideas towards implementation. One of the main ways we do this work is through our water infrastructure program called NEWEN, or the New England Water Infrastructure Network. And so NEWEN sits within the NEFC, and it's really focused on drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure projects across the region and helping communities and water systems access funding for those projects, primarily through the state revolving fund. And so the reason we call NEWEN a network is pretty intentional. NEWEN isn't just one organization, it's a group of partners that work closely together, each bringing a different strength to the table. And so that includes groups like RCAP Solutions, Moonshot Missions, Quantified Ventures, the University of New Hampshire Stormwater Center, the Cooperative Development Institute. We also have a pool of consultants that we work very closely with. And so between all of these partners in this network, we are able to bring a lot of niche expertise. So some partners might focus more on community engagement, some might focus more on the financial strategizing side of things, some on stormwater and watershed planning, and then others might be more hands-on technical support for small systems and operators. And so our role at NEWEN is to really just help coordinate this support so that communities aren't trying to piece all of it together themselves. And so communities can come to NEWEN at all different stages. Some might be really early on in their planning, just trying to define a project or understand what their options might be. Others are already trying to work through state revolving fund programs, maybe trying to prepare engineering reports or affordability and rate setting questions. And so even if they've already had some funding that they've lined up, they might just need some extra capacity to try to help keep projects moving forward. And so wherever they're starting from, the goal is always the same, to try to help reduce barriers, build out local capacity, and try to keep good water infrastructure projects from getting stuck in those really early stages. And now just to give a really general high level snapshot of the kinds of support that we can provide through NEWEN. On a broad level, our support can span, again, that full project life cycle. They can start very early on, helping communities define their problem, think through options, figure out what a realistic project scope might look like. And then from there, we can often support planning and asset management work that helps communities prioritize investments over time. And so as projects take shape, we help with project development and funding readiness, things like, again, shaping those engineering reports, navigating procurement, and making sure projects are positioned to align with state revolving fund and other funding programs. And another big piece of the work is our engagement. So helping to translate technical information into more plain language, supporting boards and public conversations, and building up an understanding and a buy-in within the community. Now I'll pass it over to FB to share a little bit about them.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, so FB Environmental is based in Portland, Maine and Dover, New Hampshire. We're a small business of about 20 people, and our team brings together scientists, geologists, planners, and GIS specialists. And we like to say we work where science meets practice or where science meets real world problem solving. And we try to support communities, organizations, and private clients in tackling environmental and infrastructure challenges. Our work spans planning, design, data analysis, and implementation with a strong focus on practical solutions that are grounded in science. Overall, our goal is to help clients understand environmental challenges, plan effectively, and move projects from concept to action. And on the next slide, this just helps ground FB Environmental's role. So we work really closely with municipalities to understand local priorities and challenges. We listen to community members and stakeholders, translate those needs into practical project designs, and then carry those projects through completion. From there, we help secure future funding so the work continues over time, creating a living and ongoing process rather than a one-time effort. Oh, I think you're muted, Matt.
Thank you. So the way these projects got started is really a story about collaboration and local stewardship. And so it wasn't driven by a single grant or a top-down directive. It grew out of conversations between the communities themselves, New Hampshire DES, and technical partners who were all noticing the same pressures along the upper Saco River. Over the past several years, recreation and visitation in this corridor really started to outpace the existing management capacity. And so communities were seeing things like erosion and informal access points, littering and trash scattered around, and emerging water quality concerns more frequently. And they were hearing about it directly from residents and river users. There was a shared sense that it made more sense to be proactive, to protect the river and the broader watershed now, rather than waiting for the problems to worsen and snowball. And so at the same time, staff bandwidth was limited and the path forward, again, wasn't always clear and obvious. And so that's where the partnership came together. The state of New Hampshire and the Department of Environmental Services working alongside communities and private partners to explore what targeted technical assistance could look like. And NEWEA helped coordinate that support. And so the goal wasn't to impose a solution, but to meet communities where they were, combining local knowledge and priorities with technical planning and funding expertise. And so what emerged was a collaborative approach grounded in community goals, protecting the Saco River, safeguarding water quality, and building a path forward that communities could realistically sustain over time. What makes this approach work is really how intentionally it brings together pieces that are often handled separately. So first, it directly links recreational management with stormwater and watershed planning. Instead of treating recreational impacts as a standalone issue, this work recognizes that erosion, sediment, and water quality concerns are fundamentally watershed and stormwater challenges. And that shift in framing helps communities move from reacting to visible problems toward planning solutions that protect the river system as a whole. The approach also blends technical analysis with public-facing engagement. So we're not just producing reports, we're pairing data and planning work with tools like story maps and accessible visuals that help residents, boards, and visitors understand what's happening on the ground and why it matters. And so that shared understanding is really important for building up support and momentum for these projects. And finally, this work is done with the funding in mind from the start. So it's structured to build the why, the what, the how, that these funding programs are looking for: clear problems, defensible data, and defined next steps. And so that makes it much easier for communities to move from planning into state revolving fund and other long-term funding pathways. Now back over to FB.
Great. So I'll just talk a little bit more about the Conway, New Hampshire project. We came into this project with a pretty strong foundation as FBE has worked with Conway on prior projects. So we understood the community, local priorities, and stakeholders who cared deeply about the Saco River. And in recent years, the river has received growing public and media attention, especially during peak summer weekends. Articles and social posts raised real concerns about crowding and overuse, but most of the information was relatively anecdotal. There was little on the ground data to show what was truly happening. So, this project was designed to change that. During the summer recreation season, we collected recreation counts at 4 locations along the Saco River and documented where heavy use was contributing to shoreline erosion, vegetation damage, and potential impacts to sensitive natural areas. So now Conway has a clear picture of when and where recreation pressures occurs and what impacts are emerging. So this baseline data provides a really solid foundation for communicating with the public, planning river access, and protecting natural resource areas, as well as using that information to make informed decisions about future river management and investments. So what did this look like on the ground? During the summer of 2025, our team collected recreation data at 4 locations along the Saco River. We counted how many people were recreating on the river and documented where recreational activity was starting to affect landscape. So, alongside the counts, we assessed areas where repeated foot traffic, boat landings, and bikes were contributing to shoreline erosion and vegetation damage. We also looked closely at locations where recreation could pose risks rare or sensitive species and habitats. So, one of the most striking findings was the presence of informal foot and mountain bike trails cutting directly through an extremely rare natural community along the river corridor. The most significant impacts were observed on gravel bars and point bars in the upper portion of the river, where repeated traffic led to vegetation trampling, localized sediment disturbance. And this really matters because this natural community is exceptionally rare. It's a globally restricted to a short stretch of the Saco River between Conway, New Hampshire, and Freiburg, Maine. And then I'll pass it to Elliot to talk a little bit more about the Hearts Location project.
Thanks, Grace. Yes, I'll be talking about the project we worked on in Hart's location. So in 2023, FB Environmental worked with the town of Hart's location to develop a river corridor management plan for the Saco River and the Swift River corridors. So this comprehensive technical document provided a review of existing resources, land use, threats to the corridors, and goals to address management issues and threats. While comprehensive, this plan is lengthy and technical and likely wasn't being utilized to its fullest potential by residents, river users, and town planners alike. So over the past few years, it just didn't seem like the plan was getting utilized to the fullest degree that it could be. So through observing that, it's evident that to address concerns spanning multiple river corridors in such a large geographic area, it's most effective to ensure that each planning action includes voices from each of the communities present within the corridor. And in rural and largely seasonal communities, this is much easier said than done. So yeah, much of the workforce in these areas is seasonal as well. So as a result, for this phase of our Hearts Location project, we identified the goal a goal of increasing the accessibility of the river corridor management plan by providing a user-friendly and easily digestible version of the Saco Swift River Corridor Management Plan through an ArcGIS story map format. If you'll go to the next slide, Matt. Thank you. So we developed a story map that took the key content from the original river corridor management plan and presented it in a succinct format that allows the everyday user to easily navigate to specific sections of the report. And this story map also engages the user for a longer period of time through the integration of interactive maps, photos, videos, and direct links to reference reports and web pages. So, sort of a revolving cycle of information. And the story map is also provided in French and Spanish, which are linked to the primary English version of the report. And this allows for bilingual access, interpretation, and hopefully future involvement from non-native English speakers and seasonal users of the river corridor. There's a link there in the PowerPoint of the story map if you'd like to scan that QR code and view it. Might be a little clunky. I'm not sure how this will be presented, but hopefully everyone will have a chance to take a peek at that.
Okay. So this slide highlights what all that collaboration and planning actually produced. So from an outcome standpoint, the work resulted in corridor scale data that communities can actually use. Instead of isolated observations, Conway and Hart's location now have shared information that helps clarify where erosion and water quality impacts are actually occurring and how increased recreation is contributing to those issues across the Upper Saco River watershed. Another key outcome was the creation of public-facing tools that make this information accessible. As Elliot was just mentioning, the story maps and related materials translate technical findings into formats that boards, residents, and visitors of the river can understand. And that's helpful because increased awareness is one of the core points of this work. And so that increased awareness for recreational impacts and building out that shared understanding of why management and infrastructure investments are needed was crucial. And so both communities were able to use the planning and documentation developed through this effort to move forward in the state revolving fund process. So Conway and Hart's location were both placed on New Hampshire's Clean Water State Revolving Fund priority project list, and Hart's location was able to submit their full CWSRF application at the beginning of the new year, and Conway plans on submitting their full CWSRF application in the coming months. And so just to wrap up with our main takeaways and what it points to moving forward. So the first takeaway is that capacity comes first. So planning efforts work best when they're matched to the staff time, to the technical expertise, and the bandwidth that the communities actually have. Starting with right-sized planning and technical assistance allows communities to engage without overcommitting, and it helps reduce the risks of projects stalling out early on. Another takeaway is the importance of telling the how with your story. So not just relying on your data, but of course, understanding data analysis really matter, but that they're most effective when they're being paired with clear visuals and public-facing tools that show how recreational pressure translates into erosion and water quality impacts. And then also planning and funding in mind makes a big difference. So defining scope and costs and eligibility early on helps position projects to move more smoothly through that state revolving fund process instead of having to rework plans later on to meet the program requirements. So looking ahead, this work really unlocks what can come next. So sustained monitoring in the Upper Saco watershed, implementation readiness, and long-term watershed stewardship. And so for Conway and Hart's location, that means having a clear path forward to continue protecting the Upper Saco River and the larger watershed that it supports. And thank you guys so much for listening.